There's a very interesting story that I know of. You're a CA topper from DU University, and that ended up giving you one of the lifetime experiences.
People who've topped the university to come and watch the Republic Day parade with him. So 1990 January, I got a chance to sit in a stall right next to where the Prime Minister, who invites the foreign dignitary, who's there. So it was great fun. The fun part of it is it was like getting paid and yet doing your MBA, because in a consulting job you're doing various projects.
A lot of times we hear these news that India's education system is not so great, and the kind of talent that comes out from either from engineering management or they're not employable. Let's be very straightforward. How do you see this in the dynamics of our upskilling business?
Yeah, so that's one part of the problem statement which you said, and this is something which is not a new discovery for India. But I think the upskilling idea is a much bigger idea. It's about, how do you stay relevant? Because jobs profiles are changing, job demographics are changing. One thing about the calorie thing, obviously, people want to indulge, but I think the only exception is they have it with the Diet Coke, which is,
right.
which is something. And the second one is, I think, the toppings is what was customized to India, like a paneer topping.
Yeah. That's palate game, right? End of the day.
So they had to think about that, and that made it like, okay, people started loving pizzas. India, which was not introduced to pizza as an idea, started loving it because the toppings were customized to a paneer tikka topping, and that's like, this works. It's about the people stories, and it's about when I go and meet people, they will remember me for what I brought to the table, whether it was on a professional or a personal level. I think that's what's going to matter the most. The memories that you create are going to be about the relationships that you build at everywhere.
Hi Karan, how are you?
Very well.
Thank you. I know that you have traveled travel kare, but thank you for doing this with us. It's always a pleasure to come and talk to a veteran in the startup space. Your experience has been really tremendous, and I've seen and heard a lot of stories while we were, thinking about doing this podcast with you. But so, first of all, thank you so much for doing
Pleasure.
this. Right.
Yeah.
Let's primarily start with understanding a bit for our audience for your background. Right. There's a very interesting story that I know of. That your university days, right? You're a CA topper from DU University, and that ended up giving you one of the lifetime experiences. Can you let's talk about that? I'm very fascinated with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I should go to my class 12. I've always, been in the class through my schooling times, between first, second, third in the class. But after my 12th, I did not get enough, marks to get into SRCC. Everybody's ambition was to get into Shri Ram College of Commerce. And I missed it by 6 marks. And obviously I couldn't, go into Hindu or Hansraj, but I decided not to go to the North Campus. I decided, ab ghar ke paas, there's Venkateshwara College, which is a South Campus. I will get more time to myself. And I had other things to, also go and play in the evening with my friends, etc. So I said, I'll probably get, a lot more time because, you're traveling on a DTC bus all the way to North Campus, coming back, pura din nikal jata tha. So I decided to chose a Venkateshwara College. So I joined the college. First year was fun, like typical colleges, and gave the first year's exam. And then I figured out that I was probably second in the Delhi University ranking, which was kind of unique and surprising because, somebody from Venkateshwara College who typically, so normally the first guy is always from SRCC. And I was like pretty close to the guy who was first. So I said, यार, अब तो फिर जान मारनी चाहिए अगले 2 साल के लिए. नहीं होगा तो कोई बात नहीं, because the aggregate of 3 years is what's going to count. So that's one decision I took. I felt like, I'd taken a choice to be closer to home, which was in the South Campus. Second was also after the first year's marks, I said, okay, now it gives me a focus to kind of, try the second and the third year. And, if that helps me, can get the mark. The other important thing, which I think is also important for maybe the listeners, is I chose not to do other parallel courses along with my graduation. Okay. So a lot of my friends...
This is a very common practice these days, or even before.
Well, that time, you had, if you're especially in doing BCom honors, which I was, a lot of, friends of mine were doing ICWA along with that, which basically meant, you attend your college in the morning, then you go to the ICWA classes in the evening, and then you're kind of preparing for that, or CS as a matter of... CA was not allowed to, be done in parallel. ICWA and CS was.
It was not allowed. I thought
CA was not allowed.
Okay.
CA was only after the graduation, but ICW and company secretary was allowed.
Okay.
So I chose not to do those. I think 90% of my, professional, who were budding professionals, colleagues and, friends from college, they were doing it. But I said, nahi yaar, let me focus on one thing. And that actually yielded the dividends, because my focus on just doing my graduation properly and also enjoy the college life resulted in a good outcome.
It's not good outcome. You topped that university
It
after the
was
3 years of
3 years of hard work with a lot of fun. I mean, if you go and ask my college friends, I was as much enjoying college life as I was probably studying.
and that resulted in getting you in doors, closed doors with the President of India, and also attending the Republic Day parade as well. After that, I heard.
Yeah, I mean, these are things, or the benefits or privileges of a Delhi University topper, which I wasn't aware of. I got.
So you wasn't.
I wasn't aware of
So
that.
you were chasing just the last.
I was like, okay,
second guy
first
that
year,
was-
second year, and then third year, the numbers came, and I said, okay, and everybody high five. This is first time Venkateshwar's got a Delhi University topper, which hadn't happened. Every time it was SRCC. But then I got invited to a high tea with the Vice Chancellor of Delhi University,
Right.
and then so the award ceremony, the Vice President of India, who's a de facto Chancellor of the Delhi University, would come and give the award.
Wow.
So that is when I got my gold medal from Shri Shankal Dayal Sharma, who was the Vice President at that time. He eventually became the President.
Wow.
And then I joined CA. I was in Jammu auditing Hindustan Lever's factory. And my dad called me. He said, you know what, you got a invite from the Prime Minister's office that he invites the select, people who've, topped the university to come and watch the Republic Day parade with him. So I'm talking about 1980.
How that call felt.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It was fantastic. 1989 is when I had cleared my, BCom, and 1990 January I got a chance to sit in a stall right next to where the Prime Minister, who invites the foreign dignitary who's there. So it was great fun. I mean, watching, and obviously you feel the thrill of the Indian patriotism, everything that's going there. You're seeing it live, right front and center.
Okay, that's fascinating, and the greater part is that you didn't even know that these perks are available, and you ended up getting all surprised.
Yeah, all
for,
surprises. Nice surprise. Yeah.
Every hard work that. So and then post that, obviously, you ended up going for your chartered accountancy.
That's right. Yeah.
At
See, other benefit of topping the university was that you walk into any big accounting firm where you want to do your articleship, they cannot refuse you. So normally that time, to get into you have to start your articleship for 3 years, which is mandatory as part of the CA course. But the choice of firm typically used to be through relationship. If you knew somebody, you'd get placed over there.
And this was happening in Delhi itself?
It was happening in Delhi. I've been a Delhi boy. So after I cleared my exam and got my results, I go to A. Ferguson, which is the leading firm at that time, and I just go to the reception and I just hand it over, and I said, will I get a chance? He said, since you've topped the university, we are bound to give you, a place in our batch of,
And I'm sure you were a smart.
Well, in hindsight, we can, but just telling you that these are the things that came, and as they say, if you work hard, you get a good outcome. There are other things, other doors that open.
No, that's most certainly happens to people who really come up on top for best of the things that they do. So this stint after the articleship, CA and everything, right? A general route for any person would be to go towards consulting. So run me down with a little bit more on your careers.
Yeah, no. So I was obviously finished my articleship. That time I hadn't done. I had no idea about computers. And as I was entering after my CA qualification, what role should I do? Obviously I was interviewing with industry, which is the companies who would hire the fresh CAs, the banks had got into a bit of a freeze because the Harshad Mehta scam had hit at that time in 1992. So the banks were like, we're not hiring. And then obviously, the professional firms, which is where I qualified from, they would look to hire, you back, or consulting firms.
Right.
And I was lucky, that Anderson Consulting, which is a big consulting firm at that time, which is doing a lot of system integration projects. And this is something like somebody who had no idea about what computers are. My first job was system integration. I was sent to Chicago to learn COBOL because they thought that was the best thing in the world.
How old were you back then?
I was back in 90. I was 23, 24.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it was good fun, learning computers, and that became very, very addictive for me because I could feel that was very transformative.
Right.
While I had no clue about how computers work, but just getting oriented to system integration, implementing new systems, seeing the change, learning new languages, and then doing customizations. So the next 2.5 years was just kind of project to project, and learning about what. So the fun part of it is it was like getting paid and yet doing your MBA, because in a consulting job you're doing various projects, you're meeting different industries, you're interacting with the senior most people, you're getting guidance from your managers, your partners, you're learning new things.
Right.
And
That's your MBA.
that's your MBA. So I said, this is fantastic.
I resonate with that completely. 2012, when I started SlydS, my father was okay, graduate हो गया है, masters कर ले, and I was beginning to my first steps at SlydS, right? And one of the key things that I told him, which convinced him that I don't need an MBA, was that पापा मैं MBA जाऊँगा, वो सब मुझे companies के case studies पढ़ाएंगे, right? बताएंगे ये company ऐसी थी, ABC of that, and I'm doing the same thing on the job. I'm getting paid for it all. You don't have to spend another 20 lakhs for me to sort of go to an MBA. I'll make that money as well, and I'll learn on the job. So yeah, kind of resonate with that on the job learning sort of was considered for me also an MBA altogether. So CA as a tool, for CA as a graduation and then to work on finance, what was the most prominent tool back then?
I was Lotus 123. It has just started coming. Everything was manual. I used to have an HL 122 calculator, which is a Casio computer calculator. If you bring it to me, my hands can work very fast on that.
Really?
Still. Yeah, absolutely. It was calculator. We would always have a calculator in our pocket. Even today, sometimes when I go to meetings, which are going to be a lot of numbers meeting, I'll carry a calculator along with me.
Is it a thing with CAs? So we recently had 2 finance CAs in our office as well. And I don't know what's with them. They have this one big calculator. That they keep, and I've never seen it.
No, I think you're trained that way. There's a bit of that, this is your, this is something that you feel comfortable, and it just helps through the process. Sometimes, you want to be 200% sure, while you're doing your mental maths. Sometimes you can just punch it in and just check, that, this is working well or not.
Very, very interesting. So let's move from, from the consulting days, traveling across the world, young 23-year-old boy. And then how did Yum Foods happen with you? I think that was the next stint.
Well, as you guys know that, thanks to, Narasimha Rao, Manmohan Singh ji, all of that, the world, India went through a bit of, the crisis, and then the, opening of the economy happened.
Right.
I think that was, and I say this a lot, I think I am that generation which was lucky because, the India kind of opened up.
Right.
In 92 is when, 91 is when the crisis happened and the economy opened up. I think a lot of the multinationals who then saw the demographics of India, they saw the potential of India, whether it's the beverages companies like the Pepsis and the Cokes, and then Yum brands, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, or, and then, a lot of the other companies, which basically saw that there was a potential here. So obviously the jobs for us became, just not just in consulting, which is where the projects were getting more and more interesting, but also they were looking for talent, finance talent, as they were setting up, they were putting, FDI, which is foreign direct investments into India, setting up stores. It's just through references and contacts, I got to know that, Yum was looking for a finance person in the business planning side. And that's something I had picked up, while I was trained as an accountant, doing audit and closing the books. But I think my calling was always on the business side of things.
Right.
Even at consulting, I was more closer to what the business impact was, or business solutioning was. So then when the business planning role came, from Yum brands, which is KFC and Pizza Hut. There was no Taco Bell at that time, but KFC, Pizza Hut. I said, this is absolutely, down my alley. This is exactly what I want to do. Also, this is a bit of that, while consulting is great, you're learning, as I say, variety is the spice of life. So you get to learn multiple things. But you don't see, you walk out after making the recommendations, you don't know what happened, did the management implement it? What happened after you made the recommendations? Right. So it gave me an opportunity to go to do some real stuff where I would be, doing assessments of, putting capital investment in a store, and you do assumptions of what the walk-ins are going to be, what the sales is going to be, what the revenue is going to be, what the, margins is going to be, and see that story play out. And that's something as is true for all finance guys, right? We were right in the center. Actually, the KFC that we opened was in Brigade Road in in Bangalore. That was the first KFC. And so Bangalore again, and this is very interesting, since 1995 has been a test bed of new ideas, new innovation.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, because there's okay, let's
So
do
everyone
Bangalore, let's do Delhi.
experiments in Bangalore.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. How was that received?
It got a lot of New Friends Colony was another store, Punjabi Bagh was another store, so different.
Okay.
One was West Delhi, one was South Delhi. Long queues.
Okay.
KFC had a big brand. People were like waiting for it, and huge hype.
Okay.
But then at that time, while the government had opened up the economy, there were a lot of naysayers also.
Okay.
We had people who were like, we don't like this FDI, this is going to kill the farmers, this is not good for the country. There's a lot of cultural resistance to why we having chicken and stuff like that, and this is going to be junk food. But the interesting thing that we found, and this is something I can share, we didn't we found out that while there was a lot of good hype first 5-6 months, the restaurants did well, and after that the sales plateaued.
Okay.
And we did a research, and we figured out that the reason that had happened was because if you wanted the families to come, there's somebody in the family who was a vegetarian, and that guy would veto the decision to go and eat at a KFC, because KFC was very, very pronounced, amplified chicken idea. So they said, okay, so what are we going to do to fix that? And obviously they fixed it. The other point was, that eating out, and the reason to eat out was not very clear. I mean, it's not as often as it is today. At that time it was, you have to have an occasion, like a birthday or an anniversary, or the kids have passed the school. Today it happens, at the drop of the hat. You don't need a reason to kind of go and eat out.
You can go for it. Yeah.
But that time, you had to find a reason for that. So obviously the frequency was not great. But how do you make this as more, you keep coming back? So I think that the culture has, obviously the country is gone from, what it was in 1990s to, 2020s is very different now. But all of those were the challenges that any new entrant in India faced. While the demographic dividend was clear and the opportunity in the middle class was clear, but making that product relevant to the Indian population and having it resonate. Domino's cracked it, right? They also came around the same time. But the 30-minute delivery, and they only focused on delivery as an idea. And delivery was, from a unit economics point of view, much smarter idea, delivery and takeaway.
Of course.
Because, and pizzas was a little more higher, purchase price, or in the ASP was higher than, what chicken was able to do, because, there was no delivery idea at that time. And I think some of those things that you have to think about, what is relevant from an India point of view, that product market fit idea. I think that's what we see here. We had not heard the word product market fit at that time. But I think and then went through the learning curve. There was a huge amount of focus. There was a huge amount of investments. A huge amount of clarity that India is the market where KFC, Pizza Hut, Pepsi, etc. is going to invest.
I'm sure a lot of people inspire learnings from, how exactly you guys cracked the space. And
so obviously they had so they got the vegetarian menu back on. They started to make their brand awareness very different. The promotions were different. So you had to kind of, so there was no cookie cutter approach that this works in the US, you can take it in India and work it. No, that's a bad idea. And I think that was the biggest learning for
I recently heard Domino's CEO speak at a podcast. He's like, India is getting to aware to eat more healthy food, and pizza is not considered to be the most healthiest as such.
Yeah. But I mean, just closing on this Domino's conversation, which is like, one thing about the calorie thing, obviously, people want to indulge, but I think the only exception is they have it with the Diet Coke, which is,
right.
which is something. And the second one is, I think, the toppings is what was customized to India.
Right.
Like a paneer topping.
Yeah. That's palate game, right, end of the day.
So they had to think about that. And that made it like, okay, people started loving pizzas. India, which was not introduced to pizza as an idea, started loving it because the toppings were customized to a paneer tikka topping. And that's like, this works.
Fascinating experiences at the today I can call them old age brands altogether, but let me break this down as the phase one of your professional career life, right? Let's try to move to the phase two, which was again a very interesting and this phase that I know of. A company which I looked up growing in my college days as a case study, right? Flipkart. And I would most certainly give this credit of me becoming an entrepreneur by just understanding how or what entrepreneurship was by having Flipkart in the country altogether. That gave me enough understanding कि okay, startups कुछ होते हैं, entrepreneurship कुछ होती है, आप कर सकते हो. You were part of the very, very early days of that company, right? First of all, how did you land at Flipkart? If there's an interesting story behind it. And then obviously, please run me down on how the early days of the company looked like for you.
Yeah, before I get there, I think and we were just wrapping up on the Yum brands and food and the traditional brands, setting it up. I think and I'd moved to Dubai, with Yum brands, and then as they say, the internet bug bit me in 2000, and I said, I must not leave that bug behind. I need to do something, So like you pointed out, I was in, more steady state companies, traditional companies. But the internet bug, bit me, and I said I must explore this idea, and that's when I landed up first in India and then in Singapore with a company called Free Markets, which is then got acquired by Ariba, which is an SAP company now.
Okay.
So they were doing something very interesting. They were doing e-auctions where large procurement buys, whether it was printed circuit boards or metal forging parts or plastic parts, etc., by large companies, automakers, Otis, or aircraft makers, etc.
Okay. They were an offline business.
No. So they were obviously they had these requirements of raw material that they had to purchase for the manufacturing plants.
Right.
But they were in the past. Their outreach to suppliers was limited into who they knew in their hinterland. If they were at a English a US company, they would have suppliers out of US. Internet actually expanded the outreach of the suppliers that you could do.
Of course. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not just did it outreach the suppliers, and also but you could actually do competitive bidding.
Okay.
And I think that's what I found very fascinating, that this is what internet was enabling. And Free Markets was doing something crazy about that, and it just got listed on the stock market after before I joined. And they had a supplier team sitting out of China. They had a supplier team. They have some presence in India. They had people in Brazil. So pretty much looking at all these countries which are the emerging markets, and suppliers for them to participate in fulfilling the raw material requirements of these big companies. And I joined them as a finance head, for their Asia market. And I was, in India to set up the India office, and then I moved to Singapore, where, I was looking at the whole Southeast Asia and the Asia Pac region, all the way from Japan to Australia to Southeast Asia to India, Greater China, everything. And it gave me a view of, what the world was transforming. And again, at the back of my head, it was internet which is enabling that. So I'm going to just leave that thought with you, that internet had already got into somewhere in my subconsciousness that was enabling it. And I had transitioned from large companies, multinationals, global, traditional, into something which wasn't a startup, but was leveraging new.
It's a new age
technology.
business. Yeah, I mean, it was leveraging new tech.
Software and service. It was not just pure service, it was software and service idea. So I did that for about 5 years.
Oh wow, that's a long stint. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And I was in Singapore.
Are you a fan of business as a company today? Yeah,
I've heard great things about it. No, absolutely.
One of my new age fascinating company, which I really really love.
No, you're right, and I think that's how. And a lot of that off business kind of models had started off at that time. When I'm talking about the .com bubble burst and all that kind of stuff.
They have.
But they were early to that time, And sometimes I feel like, and that this timing matters a lot.
It does.
Your model and your idea can be great, but if you're not at the right time, you're not going to be able to crack it.
Absolutely.
And we've heard a lot of
things in life as well, but yes.
So that's happened to me 5 years, and I went through that. And then I was in Singapore, and then we decided to move back to India because we want our kids to grow up in India, and that's something as Sujot and Gurman was getting, to their schoolings, etc. We wanted to come back, so that's when I moved back to Gurgaon.
Okay.
And then just fast forward to 4 years where I spent was in Sapient. Sapient was a typical IT consulting company.
It was.
But pretty much competing with the Indians like the Wipros and the Infosys and the TCSs and often the IBMs. but it had a very different mindset about, how, and because they saw the change which is coming in the world faster.
Okay.
So they acquired a small company out of which was a digital marketing company
Right.
in Miami. So I said, why would an IT company acquire a digital marketing company?
Okay.
And then I got a chance to be the vice president and the managing director of Sapien in India.
Okay.
That gave me a ringside view of everything that was happening in the US. And then because I used to go for these leadership meetings,
Right.
and then all the people, when they would think about in what the strategy should be, they got a view that the world is changing. And this is, I'm talking about the developed world. I'm not talking about India yet.
Got it.
I'll come to the India part later and the Flipkart story.
Yeah.
But what was happening was that the companies were transitioning from the traditional, let's say as an example, is Target was moving from offline to online. They were looking at, so that internet was disrupting that part of the world, the
Yes.
developed part of the world, not yet in India.
Not
India,
yet.
nobody had any idea about e-commerce.
Nope.
Okay, and just the problem was that when I was the managing director of Sapient, I figured that the talent that you needed in India to do the work or the projects which were basically in the developed world in the economies there, those projects were changing. They were no longer application development maintenance, which is the ADM kind of work,
Yep.
which is testing करनी है, develop करना है, ये करना है.
The whole services approach.
अभी content आ रहा है, अभी commerce आ रहा है, and that is all happening on a digital. So I said, if India is not going to think about that, and there was no Amazon, there was no Flipkart in India, so people had no idea about how an e-commerce works.
Right.
And then suddenly you have to start building platforms, e-commerce platforms for a US company. You had no comprehension about how e-commerce works. So then we started something in when I was there in Sapient was a digital marketing arm. So we said, let's start selling to Indian clients, and we got a few clients, Taj, Citi, etc. That we were able to sell digital marketing to them.
Okay.
And so the bottom line, what I'm saying is, at Sapient 4 years, I saw the disruption that internet was doing. Internet was making the brands think about content and commerce. Internet was making them think about multi-channel. And I said, this is a wave that's going to come to India.
Getting introduced to internet in terms of commerce per se, and the one company, Flipkart, in this which fascinated me a lot and got me introduced to entrepreneurship or startup as a word. कि होता क्या है, मतलब startup क्या होता है? And I still owe it to them, to be very honest. Right? They got me this bug that what does an entrepreneurship or a startup kid looks like. But you were very early with that company. How did that happen? And please run me down your experience on how Flipkart was back then and what was your role like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is something that is most top of mind for most people when they meet me. And like I said, so I had seen that the disruption of internet, what it was doing in the Western world, where it was because of Sapient, and Sapient was getting me that exposure. I knew that disruption was going to come to India. After I had tried to kind of grow the digital marketing business in Sapient, and we were growing, but not at the pace and the speed at which I wanted to acquire companies, etc. It was not happening, and I was at crossroads, whether I should continue to be in a general management role or should I go back to my finance roots. And then got a call from one of the headhunters about they were looking for a CFO at Flipkart. Wow. And that's when the process started.
This is 2011.
11.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 2011.
So about 3 years into the business, they were 3-4 years.
They started 2007 or 8 is when they started. Yeah, you're right. 11. Yeah. 3-4 years into the business. And and like I was more on the B2B side of the internet, but this B2C was interesting, where I said, yeah, this is going to be very interesting. So obviously met Sachin Bini, met a couple of other people, met Lee at Tiger, met a few other guys, and it was fascinating to see what they were creating, but it obviously meant that I had to relocate to Bangalore. It was not an easy decision, given that I was Delhi, kids were in Delhi, parents, only child. And but I thought the opportunity was going to be like interesting, just from a learning point of view, and being able to give back to what Flipkart was building. So I moved to Bangalore in full time, in early 22. Although with the Sapient role, I was kind of spending time between Delhi and Bangalore.
Okay.
But now this was more kind of
you introduced to the city in which is.
So I was familiar with the city. So that's when I moved to Bangalore. And early days of Flipkart was all about And one thing was very clear. This, and Sachin Binier always a big focus on customers are always the center, and you have to build everything around the customer.
And the commerce business, I can assume.
Commerce, the books had kind of become like a de facto, kind of, known for. And one of the interesting stories I have to tell you is, and this was when I was in Delhi and Pragati Maidan, there's a book fair which happened, a World Book Fair.
Yeah.
Flipkart had a stall in that, and at the end of the stall, they asked people to write, and they had a wall, and on the wall they said just put a post-it what you like about Flipkart or what you don't like about Flipkart. And when the data came, and somebody kind of pulled all the post-its down and say, what we love about what you guys do is you always meet the expectations, you deliver what you promise.
Right.
And I could see that that was the big mantra for Flipkart, that the service and the customer centricity was always key, and that's something that they were very proud of, and actually it was reflected in the way some of the people over there gave feedback on. So books was a solid issue, and I think the question was now to get into other categories. Had to, but we got to raise money, and that's the first project that I had to do.
Yes.
The first thing I had to do was also what's my business plan going to look like. I'm very oriented to at least doing an AOP and trying to see what the year is going to look like, and Flipkart had never done an AOP, so I think one of the things that I had to do was set up an AOP.
You were the first CFO?
I was the first CFO.
Oh
there,
wow!
yeah.
Okay.
And then the other thing was, how do you measure unit, the P&L? What are the line items at which you're going to start looking at the P&L for an e-commerce company? While Amazon was listed, but Amazon gave very little information. So what are the right ways to kind of measure success or P&L for a company like Flipkart? Whether it's a gross margin, is this product margin, is this a CM? Then I'm contribution margin, and now I know there's a CM 1, 2, and 3. But I think a lot of those basics of how to kind of look at the business was to be done, because you can't build a business plan unless you know where you're going to start measuring.
What were the first few metrics as a CFO?
Well, definitely the product margin, which is the buy sell margin. Okay. Second is the gross margin, where the cost of delivery, the cost of the product, the everything that the payment gateway, etc. There was a cash on delivery, which was very high at that point of time,
very high.
And there was a cost to do that. There was you not
because you were dealing with the product which was not so high margin, not the margin. I think it was not so expensive as such.
It was not very expensive, and also because the ticket size was smaller, so small, so you had to kind of think about. But at least you have to start looking at and then you're looking at everything that's needed from a warehousing and fulfillment point of view,
right?
And the team that you need to put the catalog, so that became your CM1. Now it's CM1. Now I would just call it at CM, and then you're building for scale. So all your technology and marketing that you're setting it up for the big scale, that's opportunity. That was after the CM, and then you got to the EBITDA. Absolutely. So at least we got that orientation to build a business plan. And obviously it was new, and I think
how was your persuasion with the first set of investors look like from there?
Again, before we got to the investors, we had to get the team, right, which is the founders as well as the business guys, to start thinking about this and start put some cadence in terms of reviews. But very quickly we figured out we had to raise money, and through introductions of the existing ones. So we didn't have a banker at that time. We just went ahead and started giving what the opportunity was, and there were metrics that they wanted to look at. What's your cost of delivery, which was a big item for them, because nobody had seen that in India. How will you do this? Will you do it at 40 rupees for every delivery, or is 82 rupees at a delivery? And I remember the first investor who came in made me sign as a schedule to the agreement that, okay, this is your cost of delivery, bloody sign it here, otherwise so there was, and this was all, everybody was kind of kind of learning as we were going along. So fantastic experience, and then just to kind of get raise the money, but there were also dark clouds around the regulatory environment at that time.
It was,
and that's something I would say was my biggest challenge at Flipkart.
Okay.
In how to kind of sort that out, how to make sure
that... Are you specifically talking about the foreign direct investments?
Yes, it is. As the regulatory environment was very clear, how we operate, how do e-commerce companies operate, are they going to be in compliance? How do you make sure this is in compliance? There are regulators who are looking. It wasn't
so lucrative, I believe, back in 2012.
More than the lucrative, I think it was the compliance idea. And how do you set up? How is your business model set up to make sure that the regulator is happy that this is in kosher to what the regulations on FDI was.
Right.
And as you're thinking about the small and medium enterprises who are now looking at is this an engine which is going to give them more growth? How is there a big retailer with a lot of funds going to come and smash the business? So you had to kind of deal with some of those perceptions. But largely one of my biggest challenge was to kind of make sure that we make it kosher.
Yeah.
And we did that, and that's why we got the investors to put in. So that's
So what was that raise? About
it was $150 million.
150
Yeah,
is what, okay. That was your series
C. Yeah.
C.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, very interesting. And you from that point onwards, I'm assuming the categories were more introduced to the business. They were.
It was. I was. Yeah. But one of the things, and unfortunately, I wasn't there to kind of go through the next 2-3 runs of the new category build outs, because for personal reasons I had to kind of leave and get into a little more steady state job, because as startups and growths are fairly dynamic and fairly intense, and there's something at home that I need to take care of. So I moved on, and I was with it was interesting, and some of the guys would kid me that people are moving from offline retailer to an online retailer, but you are moving from an online to an offline. I moved with Tesco, which is a big retailer in the UK,
right.
But that gave me at least some time to kind of deal with matters at home.
Right.
But you know what, the bug, and this is something that you had mentioned to me before we started the podcast, but how do you kind of transition from large companies to these new age companies, startups?
Yeah.
I think that bug about being closely associated to entrepreneurship was always there.
Right.
So while I'd left Flipkart and had to steady the ship at home, one of the things I started with some friends and family was a company called TyresNmore.com.
Yes, I'm a great experience and customer for that company right now.
Yeah, it's great to hear. Yeah. And this is something that it was a problem statement was very clear. People don't know enough about they have to go out, they have to find a tire shop, and then they go there, and then they spend like 3 hours, and then they get.
It's a company with friends and family itself.
It was friends and family. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. Yeah. And friends and family.
I didn't know it was that long back. 2000 and.
I think it started in 2014.
Oh, wow, okay.
15.
And when
14.
did C8 acquire them?
C8 came in as a strategic investor in 2000. I don't exactly remember. I think 2017 or something. Okay. And then. I think now, which is very recently, which is last year, is when they said, we're going to make it as a fully owned subsidiary of.
But it's still run by the same brand name. I mean,
it's run by the same brand name. It's the largest. There are a lot of companies which try to do on something in the online on the tire as a category, and then related categories. They've failed. TyresNmore resonates. People come back and keep buying. People buy for their more cars in the same family.
Absolutely.
It's a repeat purchase idea. There are so many things that
and it's a high ticket value item.
High ticket value. It's multiple cities now. We started in Delhi, and then we got to Bangalore, but now it's in Hyderabad, it's in Pune, it's in Bombay. So absolutely growing. But again, I think the point I was trying to make is that whole idea about being entrepreneurial, basically learning from what Flipkart had done about customer centricity, learning about if you create something, how do you make it relevant and from a convenience point of view. So you should look at the van which goes to the doorstep.
Yeah, I am. I've looked at it. Yeah. I was very fascinated the way the van came to my door and the way they fixed it, everything in a quite some time. Very exciting times for India in the Edtech space where your experience with Simplilearn, right? How did that end up? And I'm assuming your role again with them was looking at setting up new age companies and new age businesses. So how was that with Simplilearn? And that's my favorite topic. By the way, education tech is my thing. So I just want to know everything
No, great. And after I left Tesco, I was doing CFO advisory work for a lot of growth companies, and then the COVID happened, and I said, I think I need to go back and do a job because people are just cutting back on the consulting dollars.
Right.
So and I got introduced to Simplilearn, founder. That they were looking at doing a corporate event where they wanted to give an exit to their existing, early
like a roadshow, investment roadshow. What do you mean by corporate event?
Corporate event is as in get their early investors, which was Kalari and Helion and Mayfield and exit. Okay. And also get in a new investor who could put some capital and then take it to the next level.
Right.
Obviously, there were bankers involved, and this whole. So I joined them with that big project in mind that this is the first thing which has to go off the blogs, and successfully executed by the time I joined, which was in September 2020. And by July, August is when we had Blackstone invest.
How much money did we raise at Simplilearn back then?
Secondary and primary combined was about $250 million. This is all in the public information.
Right.
So I think I can say that. But I think the point about Simplilearn has had fantastic track record of what they were doing profitably, which was about the skilling space. I think the opportunity as the world was getting more and more global and with new technologies, the idea was how do you kind of meet the demand for more, I would say, a deeper understanding. So rather than just doing certifications, which are short programs you take for a month or 3 months, and they're oriented, you give an exam, you clear it, and you get a certificate. Versus, can there be more immersive way of teaching a subject, whether it is AR and ML, or it is DevOps, or is it something in the cloud, or something on the cybersecurity. Takes a longer period of time, which basically meant that you have to attend some live classes.
Okay.
And that was what was unique about Simplilearn, that you would actually come and spend some time on the weekend attending live classes. I think that to me appealed a lot, and I think that's something has been.
I think not a lot of edtech companies adopted to that model. They were
Correct.
completely digital for
Correct.
a while, but then Simplilearn did it from the very beginning.
Correct. Correct. So I think that's what's unique about Simplilearn, and I think that's something you could be an instructor who's good at this, sitting anywhere in the world, and you could have students coming in from India, US, any part of the world. I think that was very, very appealing, and that something has kept Simplilearn in good stead, because that's the model which they have perfected.
Upskilling, right? This is something that keeps coming up with obviously with the current flow of education that we have. Especially, I would not want to go K-12 market. Let's just keep it post. A lot of times we hear these news that India's education system is not so great, and the kind of talent that comes out from either from engineering management or any other skill level, they ended up not so good for companies to, or they're not employable. Let's be very straightforward. How do you see this in the dynamics of our upskilling business, or something that is required for these people?
Yeah, so that's one part of the problem statement which you said, and this is something which is not a new discovery for India. This has been going on from the time that the Infosys and the Wipros and TCS has been employing only 30% of the population of engineering graduates coming out are employable, and then they have to put them into their own training programs to get them ready for
So
projects.
companies are always ready that we need to spend 2 years
Correct.
with these
Correct.
new joinees before they even
Correct.
start
And I think
making
they've
dollars for
figured
us.
it out, what are the, interventions they have to do to get the person. As long as the person's got the basic chops ready, they get trained to get ready to be staffed on projects. But I think the upskilling idea is a much bigger idea. It's about, how do you stay relevant for new, because jobs profiles are changing, job demographics are changing. What you thought was you're going to be doing today is not necessarily what you're going to do tomorrow, because that job may require a different level of skill, and are you then kind of keeping pace with that? So broadly at a high level, and I'm not the expert on the policy side of things, but at a high level, the lifelong learning of upskilling, for anybody who's coming out of college and wanting to stay relevant, or in the middle management layer to kind of stay relevant, or even in the middle management wanting to become a senior management, and putting some thought leadership in caps on. I think the skilling continues to be a great idea.
Okay.
The Simplilearn, and there are multiple other players, make this happen, from a convenience point of view, because sitting at home and doing that.
Right.
They will make sure that the best in breed trainers, instructors, master classes are coming to you. Okay. That's the best part about Edtech.
Okay.
You
can bridge that gap quickly.
Can bridge the gap, and you're trying to simulate a classroom environment that you would get. But does that get you the entire classroom experience that you would do and get, and that immersive experience if you're going to a school or a college, or you're sitting in a university class? The short answer is no. But it does cover a significant part. I think they also, and most of them, and I'm not speaking anything unique about either Simplilearn, there are so many others. They also do interventions, whether it is projects that you have to do, or capstone based projects, or other things that you have to do, which are to make sure that you are kind of reflecting on what you've learned and building on that. There is potentially a community idea that once the students get together, and then there are communities of people who can then create chats and just kind of discover what are the topics to be kind of discussed. I think those are also potentially possible.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are companies which came in recent past and have raised tremendous amount of capital to improve this hypothesis. Stoa or other companies not doing so great. I'm sure they're about to close as well, which try to replicate everything what a big ass MBA college want to give it to people who are working and then get them on board and try to get them upskilled. The experience has not been great with similar companies. So while we are looking at digitizing in terms of how or digitizing the experience of how education has to be and getting the best of the teachers on board, it is not resulting in what actually people need, right? Either they need high paying jobs or even a first job, for matter of fact, if they just came from a college and have nothing in terms of their skills. So the last bit is not getting solved. Do you think it is something that education or edtech startups has to do more, or is just a in general problem of the country where we don't have jobs at all?
Uh, I think it's a combination of two. One is I think what the people saw that little opportunity. Okay, let me give them this particular skill, and they can be ready for a job at the entry level
Because that's
job.
how training institutes have been
Correct.
operating offline
Offline,
forever,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And I think so some of them thought about that. Some of them thought, okay, let me replace the whole syllabus with, I'll get the, people who are practitioners to come and talk about it. And this is again my very personal view, is I think most of the education, and if you go back to look at the Harvards and the Stanfords and the Delhi universities, they built over ages.
Right.
I don't think education you can create great, over just by a magic wand, you can create it. You have to keep working on it to kind of improve
It's
it.
like luxury brands takes 100 years to build.
Luxury brands, even the Haldirams. I mean, it doesn't. You're just not born with something that. Even the e-commerces of the world, whether it's Flipkart, where I was working, I mean, you have to build. The experience that you were creating for one category is not going to be sufficient. You have to be a horizontal player. You need to add more categories. Similarly, for EdTech, the stack that you create, if I was to look at the problem statement I'm solving is, you don't have to go to a classroom, you don't have to spend time and money to kind of, go somewhere and then, find the teacher and be there. We will bring the best in class. But how do I simulate a classroom environment to somebody who's sitting at home and, learning? That's what people need to kind of, think about solving. And taking just a sliver, in whether the companies you're mentioning about, I think it's great to kind of experiment, but whether they will work or not is something to be seen. And I think some of them have realized that there is the gap is significant.
Let's get to the phase 4 and the newest thing that you're doing. You've seen everything, right? So far, fascinating stories that I've heard from you. So India and gaming, right? This is a fascinating time. India e-commerce देख लिया, India
Right.
education देख लिया हमने. अब India gaming के बारे में बात करते हैं. So you're part of a company called Nodwin, right?
Yeah.
First, obviously, let us know what exactly Nodwin does,
Yeah.
and then please let us know how exactly it's shaping the future of Indian gaming here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Norwin is founded by Akshat and Gautam. Akshat's a dear friend, and conversations that led to the fact that I need to come and work with him, and no idea about gaming, no idea about esports. I'm more a real sports guy, as
Okay.
some of you may know. I love my golf. On the weekends, I can do any hand-eye coordination game, but this one is possibly also hand-eye coordination, but a very different kind of mental kind of response it needs. Nodwin is started its journey as an esports company, and esports is about getting the gamers and people who view a tournament, which is a gaming event happening, and get them together and do it, whether it's online or offline. And that's how they started. And then they diversified into music and comedy and festivals and anime
Entertainment
and
as a
yeah.
whole.
So you're right, absolutely. The whole media and entertainment is the sector in which they operate. Obviously, they are very focused in terms of creating those experiences for the fans, and that's why I would say it's not a gaming company. While the name of Nodwin is gaming, but it's a youth media company.
Okay.
It's where the youth want to spend the time, and this is, I think, what Akshat calls it in the best way is, timeshare of mindshare. So the mindshare of the individual, which is the youth or the fan, is at different places because he's at, watching, games, playing games, music, comedy, etc. But the time, is what you need of him. So how do you get kind of be relevant where the different places, the different passion points that the fan is. So that's what Nodwin is. How is it going to shape the future of the country? I think it's going to be. I think content is king, as everybody is saying it now. I think, but the content has its resonance or its slivers of from a gaming point of view and from music and culture point of view. I believe, and I think Nodwin believes that the way the Indian youth, which is the 16 to 24 or 16 to 34 category of people, they will basically lean towards spending time in these passion points that they have, where gaming is absolutely at the center, where they are also kind of doing themselves the gaming, but they also want to watch the players
people,
who are
yeah,
gamers
yeah,
in
yeah.
tournaments, but they also want to be at different places where which resonates with their gaming mindset in terms of watching artists,
Of course.
watching people stand up comedians, watching people who are in cosplay, are able to kind of look at what the cosplay is and bring it to real life, in a Comic-Con kind of an event. So all of this will manifest in the youth being in these parts of the
Right.
different passion points, and that is being monetized because the brands are looking to engage with that fan, in different places, and Nodwin is the only funnel in which they are able to do that because we can handle all of that.
Okay.
And I think
On a large scale.
on
as
a
well.
large scale, and so that's one part, which is where I think the youth media and the brands and brand experiences with the fans, which Nodwin controls, is going to be the journey. It's already a big company. It's public information.
Yes,
Last
very well
week.
spoken as well in the industry.
Correct.
How are
And
they doing?
we are a subsidiary of Nazara. The numbers are in the public knowledge. But now the other idea is about global expansion. I think the esports and the global mindset and the global landscape has, in many ways, got to a pause button, and they don't know what to do beyond that. Because I think there was a time, there was a fever around a lot of gaming, etc. But I think it's a hit. There's PC, there's console, and there's mobile. Mobile's overtaken
hardware, yeah.
India, China mobile, South Asia's mobile. Nodwin's specialist in mobile. But then eventually we got to think about it, and that's why we're doing these acquisitions outside India, and say, okay, the India gets it because they understand the youth, because we are a youth-oriented country. We get what they're looking for. How do we make sure that we are relevant to Europe and US?
I understand.
And there are assets which are in the US and in Europe, which are also have been doing that, but they probably need a collaboration with somebody like an Indian company like a Nodwin, who can then bring more ideas to their part of the world, while we learn from them in terms of the PC and the console and some of the other ways they do the broadcasting and experiences. They learn from us, and together then this becomes a much bigger idea for brands to use Nodwin as their go-to player to engage with their end customers. And that's at a global level. So so it's Pepsi or Red Bull or anybody can look at it. Okay, Nodwin can do this for me in India. They can do it for me in Europe, and they can do it for me in US. I'm very well covered, and they're creating a consistent user experience.
Where do you see the next wave of new games in terms of not just playing, but also in terms of development and getting more?
Yeah.
It's getting easier and easier to build content these days, and the companies like Unity and Real Engine and all are all making more easier for you to sort of build these games. So in terms of that side as well, if you can highlight something, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, no. So I think this is the tip of the iceberg, like you said. I think early days, but in the Indian audience is ready for gaming. Indian audience wants to they want the best game to work with. If there is an Indian customization to that makes it even better.
Right.
If there are games which are car racing games on
GTA
streets.
came with a Mumbai map, didn't they?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So somebody who's doing something in Tokyo streets can bring it to the Mumbai streets.
Yes.
you kind of relate to that.
Yes.
So I think that's the journey. I think the audience is sitting out there. The youth is sitting out there. I think the gaming developers will need to think about how to make it relevant and viral for them. And obviously, companies like Nodwin, companies like Nazara, who we are a subsidiary of, will play a very active role to enable that.
Will it also be enabling a lot of revenues to be made for the gamers or the community itself altogether? Will it
I believe
become
so.
A career choice for a lot of people which think?
No, I believe so. I think once there is a lot of acceptance to a game, or kind of being able to kind of make something which is relevant to the youth who wants to spend time on it, then everything which is associated with that, whether it is the game or whether it is the content or whether it is the the social campaigns around that, or the broadcasting side, everybody makes money in that, and the brands want to be there, right?
Interesting. So I mean, can we tell parents that they should allow their kids to to play more games so that they can pick this as a career in the future? Do you think?
I think like any sport, there has to be a balance. And this is, we continue to believe that. I think, I've been, and this is some of the things that as we end our podcast, I really want to talk about, my early life and when I was in school and college was always about balance. While I was great at studies, but I was making sure that I was spending time playing sports. Absolutely. I think similarly, I think the new age kids, the esport is at par with any other sport, is what I am now realizing. So as long as they keep the balance, and it's not like this is like a
Only
bad
career
idea.
choice.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
not a bad idea.
No, it's absolutely okay with that.
Absolutely. Now, this is fairly interesting, Karan, and honestly, with your experiences across the companies or places that you have, you're a veteran in the whole of startup space versus the traditional businesses as well, and you're now doing something just for the future as well. What would you suggest? Half or maybe 1/3 of the experience that you have, and a lot of people that are going to listen to this are even lesser.
Yeah.
But give me some of your top entrepreneurship lessons that you would want someone to sort of take this away from.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pankaj, for giving me that opportunity. I'm glad you called me veteran, not a dinosaur, which is better. But so one of the things is do one thing at a time. This is what I learned when I was doing my BCom, and I could have gone into spread my wings and spread myself thin to doing other courses, which I didn't, and that got me onto a journey in terms of exceeding in my graduation and then beyond that. So that's one idea. If I would like to the younger people who are looking at it, do one thing at a time.
Right.
Second is do take risks.
Okay.
I have a son who could have gone into a steady job, but he's and I've let him. It's not like I've let him. He's obviously been keen to do that, and I think it's okay. The experiences that you create, when you're taking risks, and is absolutely okay, as long as you're thoughtful about what you're doing and what you're learning out of that. I think those goals should be very clear in that.
Okay.
Third is, I think relationships is what matter most. So you're looking back, and I have lots of stories about everywhere else, but it's about the people stories, and it's about when I go and meet people, they will remember me for what I brought to the table, whether it was on a professional or a personal level. I think that's what's going to matter the most. The memories that you create are going to be about the relationships that you build at everywhere.
Interesting.
And I think today, and I should say this, but with the social media and everything digital, sometimes that that relationship idea about bonding and working closely and then having those experiences and memories is probably diluted. But make sure, and this is for the younger audience, that you are actually getting those experiences more solidified in your mind.
Most certainly, even with the professional game, I always say that people that I have met are the reasons why we are here today. And the opportunity creation cannot or will just not happen if you try creating opportunity digitally.
Yeah.
Meet people, they will always be ready to accept the ideas that you have versus the ideas that they have.
Yeah.
And they will most certainly create more opportunity doors for you, is what I personally think. So this is fantastic, Karan. Thank you so much for doing this with us. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will learn a lot of from your experience. So thank you so much.
I hope so, yeah. And thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Pleasure.
Good luck.